Today, I want to invite you to imagine something extraordinary. Imagine a life where fear and anxiety no longer dictate your choices, where you're no longer imprisoned by the past, nor anticipating a future filled with worry. Science now shows that your mind, yes, your very thoughts, hold the key to your healing and freedom. You are not hardwired to be anxious. You are not destined to live in fear. These are simply programs, and what has been learned can be unlearned. When we begin to change our internal world, our thoughts, our emotions, our energy, we change everything. Because when you think greater than you feel, and you feel greater than your current circumstances, that's when true transformation begins. So today, I'm going to show you how to step beyond the familiar into the unknown, where all possibility exists, and how you can begin to rewire your brain, unlock your heart, and live truly free. You are not your past. Your mind can rewire itself. Most people live their lives defined by their past experiences. They think about their failures, disappointments, and fears repeatedly, unknowingly reinforcing the same neural circuits in their brains. Each time they revisit a painful memory, they fire and wire the same neural networks, making those emotional states more automatic and familiar. Over time, these patterns become deeply rooted in their subconscious mind, and they begin to believe that this is simply who they are. They wake up in the morning and immediately recall all their problems, unknowingly programming their mind and body into the same predictable future. But the truth is, the brain is highly malleable. This concept, known as neuroplasticity, shows us that we are not hardwired to be stuck in any emotional state. The same way the brain wired those patterns through repetition and emotional intensity, it can also rewire itself through new thoughts, new experiences, and new feelings. When a person begins to focus their attention on who they want to become instead of who they have been, they start to activate new neural networks. By consciously choosing elevated thoughts like gratitude, joy, and empowerment, they begin to install new circuitry in their brain. The body, which has memorized the emotions of the past, starts to respond to these new signals, creating a new emotional baseline. In that moment, they stop living from a memory of the past and begin to live from a vision of the future. This is not philosophy, it is science. When we intentionally focus on new possibilities, our brain doesn't know the difference between what's happening in our external environment and what we're imagining internally. It begins to reorganize itself to match our intentions. The more we practice this, the easier it becomes to break the cycle of fear and anxiety. It requires consistency because the mind will often try to return to its familiar emotional home. But every time we interrupt those old thought patterns and choose differently, we weaken the neural connections that no longer serve us and strengthen the ones that align with our desired future. This is how transformation happens, not by chance, but by choice. Through repetition, focused intention, and elevated emotion, anyone can change the wiring of their brain and free themselves from the emotional chains of their past.
Elevate your emotional state to create new personal reality. Every thought we think produces a chemical reaction in the body, and every emotion we feel sends a signal that influences the brain's circuitry. Most people try to change their lives by focusing on external circumstances, believing that once their environment changes, they will feel better. But true change happens in the opposite direction. You must first change your internal state, independent of external conditions, in order to create a new reality. The body does not know the difference between an experience that is happening in the external world and an emotion you are creating through thought alone. When you start to embrace elevated emotions such as gratitude, love, joy, and inspiration, your body begins to shift into a new state of being. These elevated feelings become the driving force behind your transformation. By consciously generating these emotions, you begin to signal new genes in new ways, creating biochemical changes that promote healing, clarity, and personal empowerment. The moment you feel differently, you are no longer the same person. You are shifting into a new energetic frequency, and the energy you broadcast becomes a magnet for new opportunities, people, and experiences that match your elevated state. Most people wait for something outside of them to happen before they feel elevated. They wait for success to feel abundant, for a relationship to feel loved, for healing to feel whole. But when you learn to generate those elevated emotions ahead of the external event, you become the creator of your reality instead of the victim of your circumstances. This practice requires intention and consistency. It means sitting with yourself, closing your eyes, and beginning to envision a future where you already feel the way you want to feel. As you hold that vision and sustain those elevated emotions, you begin to program your body to believe that future is happening now. The body then starts to respond to the mind rather than the environment. Over time, this process conditions you to feel abundant, free, and joyful without needing any external trigger. Your brain rewires itself to align with this new emotional baseline, and your life begins to change to reflect it. You become a new person, living a new life, because you chose to think, feel, and act differently from the inside out.
Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. Every day, most people unknowingly scatter their attention across countless external distractions. They focus on problems, worries, news, social media, and the opinions of others. Each time they give their attention to these things, they are giving away their energy. Energy flows where attention goes, and whatever you repeatedly focus on grows stronger in your life. When you constantly think about what you fear, what you lack, or what you don't want, you are investing your precious energy into creating more of those very conditions. Your attention is one of the most powerful tools you possess, and learning to direct it consciously is the first step toward changing your life. The brain is a record of the past. If you keep focusing on familiar emotions and problems, you are reinforcing the same patterns of thought and behavior that keep you stuck. But the moment you begin to withdraw your attention from these external distractions and turn it inward, you reclaim your energy. When you focus on your inner world, your thoughts, feelings, and visions of your desired future, you begin to gather your energy back to yourself. This creates coherence within your brain and heart, allowing you to enter a state of clarity and balance. In this state, you can begin to intentionally direct your attention toward what you want to create rather than what you want to avoid. The more you practice focusing on your goals, your healing, and your ideal future, the more energy you invest into bringing those possibilities to life. Over time, your brain starts to rewire itself to match this new focus. You become more present, more centered, and more connected to your vision. Your body also responds by shifting its chemistry to align with the elevated emotions you're generating. You stop reacting to your environment and start consciously creating it. This process requires discipline and self-awareness because the pull of the familiar past can be strong. The mind may want to drift back into old habits of worry and distraction, but every time you catch yourself and redirect your attention toward your desired future, you're reclaiming your energy and strengthening new neural connections. Eventually, focusing on your vision becomes more natural than focusing on your fears. You become the master of your attention, and in doing so, you master your energy and your life.
Break the habit of being yourself by changing your thoughts. Most people live their lives in a predictable pattern, thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices, and experiencing the same emotions day after day. This creates a routine that becomes so familiar that it feels like their identity. They wake up each morning and unconsciously begin to run through the same mental programs,
immediately recalling their problems, responsibilities, and limitations. These repetitive thought patterns trigger the same emotional responses, and the body begins to memorize these emotions as if they are part of its identity. Over time, the body becomes addicted to these feelings, and the person becomes trapped in a cycle of thinking and feeling that keeps them stuck in the same personal reality. In order to create real change, a person must break this cycle by changing their thoughts. This means becoming consciously aware of the unconscious thoughts that have been driving their behavior. It requires noticing the inner dialogue that says things like, "I can't," "I'm not enough," or "this is just the way I am." By observing these limiting thoughts without judgment, you begin to separate yourself from them. You realize that you are not your thoughts, you are the observer of them. This awareness creates the space for change. When you deliberately choose new thoughts, thoughts of possibility, abundance, gratitude, and empowerment, you begin to recondition the brain and body to a new state of being. The more you practice these new thoughts, the more familiar they become. The brain starts to rewire itself to reflect this new mental framework, and the emotional charge of old limiting thoughts begins to weaken. This process takes consistency and commitment because the body will often resist change. It is used to the chemical states of the past and will try to pull you back into familiar emotional territory. But every time you catch yourself thinking an old thought and consciously choose a new one, you are breaking the habit of being yourself. You are interrupting the autopilot mode and creating a new possibility. Over time, these small, consistent choices lead to profound transformation. You begin to think differently, feel differently, and act differently. Your external world starts to reflect your internal changes, and you no longer feel trapped by old patterns. You create a new identity by becoming greater than the thoughts that once defined you. The present moment is the doorway to healing and freedom. Most people spend their entire lives either reliving the past or worrying about the future. They replay old memories, mistakes, and regrets, or they project their fears and anxieties onto the unknown. In doing so, they disconnect from the only true point of power they have, which is the present moment. The body and mind become addicted to these habitual states of stress, fear, and survival, and they continue to create the same emotional experiences over and over again. The key to breaking free from this cycle is to become fully present. When you bring your attention to the now, you pull your mind out of the past and release the grip of the future. In this space, there is no fear, no worry, and no regret. There is only the stillness of being, where true transformation becomes possible. The present moment is the point where the body can begin to heal and the mind can begin to rewire itself. It is the place where you have full access to your creative energy. By consciously anchoring yourself in the present, you interrupt the habitual thought patterns that keep you stuck in old emotional states. You no longer allow the past to define you or the future to intimidate you. Instead, you focus on your breath, your heart, and your inner awareness. In this state, you begin to feel a sense of peace and connection that transcends external circumstances. This present-centered awareness allows you to consciously choose how you want to think, feel, and act, rather than reacting automatically based on old programs. It is in this space that you can begin to imagine new possibilities for your life. As you sustain your focus in the present, you begin to generate elevated emotions, such as gratitude, love, and joy. These emotions not only uplift your state of being, but also signal the brain and body to begin creating new patterns of health and wholeness. Over time, this practice creates lasting change. You become less attached to your past identity and more aligned with the vision of who you want to become. You stop living in reaction and start living in creation. The present moment becomes your foundation for freedom, and from this place, everything becomes possible. You begin to realize that healing and transformation are not distant goals, but choices available to you right now.